Okay, it is now 4:50. We can begin. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the panel session. My name is Oten Swing. I'm from the Department of Information Systems and Analytics. It is my pleasure to be a moderator for this panel. Today, we are tackling a broader topic that is at the heart of what we do as researchers. Our topic for today is what is good research? We are pleased to have our panel of experienced researchers. We hope that as they share, we will be able to take away some key practical nuggets that we can apply in our own research. So may I now have the panel briefly introduce themselves and their research? We will start with Professor David Shu. Prof. Shu.
Sure, yeah. My name is David Su. I'm a roboticist. I work on robot planning and learning. Well, one rough way to understand that is it's in the intersection of robotics, AI, and machine learning. I think that's good enough for me as a start.
Yes, Prof. Min.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kan Min Yan. Everyone just calls me Min, so it's easy to remember. It's like the minimum function. I do natural language processing research, specifically interested in doing research on digital libraries, that is, how to facilitate research communication faster.
Thank you, Prof. Min. May we have Prof. Atray?
Hi, I'm Atray Kankanhali. I'm with the Department of Information Systems and Analytics. I've been at NUS a faculty since 2003. I work mainly in online communities and digital collaboration, as well as digital innovation and transformation. So my main interest is in understanding what makes users use different systems or not use them, and accordingly we see the impacts of the use of different systems. So that's what I research in. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Atray. Prof. Mitra, then Prof. Reza. Prof. Mitra, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. I'm Tulika Mitra. I'm from the Department of Computer Science, and I mainly work on designing efficient and safety critical systems, computing systems for Internet of Things and cyber physical systems, all the way from wearables to automotives and avionics. And we look at kind of designing low power, time critical systems in this space.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Reza Shokri. So I am with the CS department and work on a wide range of problems in data privacy, statistical models to machine learning, data synthesis, federated learning, and also a number of problems in trustworthy machine learning, how to achieve robustness, how to achieve fairness, and how to build a system that actually achieves all of them in a consistent manner.
Yes, thank you to the panelists for the brief introduction. I would like to now open the floor to the heart of the conversation to hear your thoughts. What is good research? Any one of you can start.
Okay, maybe let me have a stab at it. I guess I'm the only IS person here, so maybe I'll talk. I think many of these principles are universal. I think most of us consider good research as research that is novel, that contributes towards the body of knowledge, towards both academic and industry, and also is conducted in a rigorous manner. So I think we all want to contribute in a more broad sense, more fundamental work, which can maybe have many applications and wide-ranging implications. So to me, that is something which I would consider as good research. All
right, let me follow up on what Atray has started on. I think that probably there isn't a single answer to this question, but I would like to put my stamp on this. To me, there's one adjective describe not just the good research, but in fact the greatest research. There's one adjective that describes the greatest research: visionary. So the visionary research points the direction of the future of the field. It charts new directions. It enables the rest of the field, other people, to embark on a new journey and onto a new trajectory and explore that trajectory until we reach a destination that is unknown in this moment in time. Right? I think that is the greatest research. Now, sure that those kind of research is few and far between and happens only so often. But at the same time, if you think about it, when we go to our favorite conferences, right? So there are many results over there. There are many presentations over there. There are theorems, algorithms, there are experiments, and the great new systems. These are all fine. But what does the keynote speaker speak about? Right? We are there to listen to the keynote speaker. Why are they peace note? They speak their vision about the future. That's what the master of our field actually speaks about and thinks about. Right? So I think that is what I would consider the greatest research. Now, the visionary research sometimes is very broad. It could be even very remote, and also it could be even vague, right? If you think about the kind of question that Alan Turing phrased, can machines think? What is a machine? What is thinking, right? So these questions are profound and difficult and not fully answered even today, right? But other times, a vision can be very concrete, right? So if you think about the latest things that are happening in the field of computer science, AlphaGo, right? Let's beat the Go grandmaster. Can computers beat the Go grandmaster? And once that vision is set out, in a matter of years, that vision was achieved, right? and actually sooner than expected. So I think these are all examples of great vision.
Okay, I'll follow up. David gave like this great vision, right? And it's wonderful. I just thought I'll talk about good research, right? Because not all of us can achieve great research. So to me, good research is very simple. It's something that's impactful, that makes a difference, not just to you, right? Of course, you write a paper, you get, you know, there is a difference, but to you, but to the community, you know, it makes you know, it's something that nobody ever thought of. I think for me, it's like you get this aha moment that, you know, why didn't others think of it? Or when you are doing it, you know, why didn't I think of it earlier? So so that kind of that freshness of the idea, I think constitutes good research, not great research, because as David was saying, great research is something that, you know, takes the field forward. But for me, for a PhD student in particular, if you are looking for good research, I think to me that's great, good research. But also personally, for my personal taste, I think I like something that's elegant, that the solution is elegant, that anybody can understand it in a clear and concise fashion. The gist of it, of course, you know, you go into the details, and for me in systems, there is a lot of implementations and all that stuff. But the main idea, people should be able to get it very easily. I think that constitutes good research for me.
Yeah, I'll also build on the two previous responses. So I think the path to visionary requires starting with that vision in mind. I think that as PhD students, when we were all junior, we have a hard time manufacturing great visions and then sticking the course to them. So I always ask junior students to envision what the field looks like 3 to 4 years down the line. You know, when you're graduating, what are you graduating with? Why is everyone looking for you to join their computer science faculty or to join your research lab? Because you happen to be graduating with the coolest, newest, most important, most impactful research in the last 4 years, right? So I think it's important also to think about that visionary step at the very beginning, because otherwise we're always worried about, you know, incremental research, making sure we have enough publications, all those things are always on the minds of students, because there is a scorecard, so to speak, right? How many papers, how many rank ones, how many awards that you might see. And having that vision in mind as an end goal helps a lot, I think, to steer people down the right pathway. So yeah, it takes a little bit of effort to do that, and to stay that course. So I will agree with Tulika to say that it's great to have things that you can build upon, right? If people cite you, that's a one metric of that, but certainly we shouldn't get caught up in that. We should always think about what's the bigger advantage that I want to pioneer in my area. And this takes refinement, because as a beginning student, we usually don't know enough about the field, right? We have to follow other people's opinions first to get a sense of what's going on. But as we mature, we look from the top down and bottom up together, triangulate to try to get a better vision of what we want to have as our end goal when we graduate.
Yeah, so I think these are very great points. I want to actually focus on the researcher, and from the viewpoint of a researcher, try to answer this. It's good research, great research have certain characteristics, but the question is, who is a researcher, right? To answer what is good research, we have to have an understanding of what is the definition of research, and also what is good. Am I, able to distinguish good from bad, right? So all this happens from the researcher's side. So to me, research is, of course, it's about what you do, but more importantly, is about how you do it. It's a particular way of approaching problems, trying to solve problems. In your life, you can have a researcher approach to problems, right? And basically, it's a trajectory. A researcher starts somewhere from that trajectory, has some particular vision, has some certain skills and abilities. And now the question is what is the best way to traverse this trajectory, right? How can I get to the point where I can distinguish good work from bad work? There are a lot of people that publish, but they don't know what is good, what is bad, right? So I think that depends on the state of being of the researcher. It requires a particular wisdom to tell whether, what is going to be an important problem next, right? How can we achieve that wisdom? There are certain techniques that you can apply as you are going over this path in order to become more visionary, in order to become better in identifying good problems. If you ask a chef in a, I don't know, Michelin 3-star restaurant, how can I develop a good taste? So basically, he would tell you that, like, stop eating garbage, right? If you know something is good, try that one. Avoid the bad ones that you know are bad right now. So if somebody is doing research in the best style that she is aware of now, definitely in the future, that would give her more vision and wisdom to pick better problems.
Yes, thank you so much to the panelists for those good comments. A lot has just come out from your definitions of good research. I would like to piggyback on a point that is echoed across a number of you, that is, good research contributes to both academia and industry, that it is impactful. I have an excerpt here from an editorial in Nature, and I read, it says, reward papers that change society. Alongside citations and altmetric analysis, journals could publish narratives by researchers of what happened next. This narrative should be validated by testimonials from their partners or by other concrete evidence. So what this editorial is calling for is for the dissemination of impacts that followed the research after the publication. not just within the field of academia. So to what extent do you agree with this editorial? You talked about how we assess good research. I think Prof. Min even talked about ranking, general rankings and citation, but this editorial is calling for assessing impact beyond those metrics. Anyone can just jump
Yeah,
in.
I think I'll take that because this is one of my favorite topics. So as you know that, I think this pandemic is going to change us forever in some sense. And so far, I think there has been a lot of research where we kind of created the hammer and we are looking for the nail, right, for that hammer. And I think that has to change fundamentally because the society has problems and we need to solve those problems. And that's going to be universal, I think, across the board. I think in Singapore, we are fortunate to be a little bit more maybe, supported in doing all other things. But I think research that makes real impact in the society is going to be fundamentally more important. And that goes far beyond citations. That goes to something that that's solving a real problem of the world. And that's where I think interdisciplinary research is going to become far more important going forward. And I think, I completely agree with that editorial that it has to solve problems of the real world and not just focus on citations impact. I don't know if that was the question that you were asking.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Mitra. So just to follow up on research makes impact in the real world, there's a lot happening in the world now. And one of the key questions we receive from students is, when talking about research utility outside of academia, we know that research can be used in transforming healthcare, education, the military. It could also help in government solutions, for example, even in solutions that aid, censorship and surveillance of citizens. And one of the key questions the students are asking is, to what extent should researchers be concerned about the context of use? Should we regulate where our research is used, and will this be fair for researchers? May I have Prof. Reza start on this one?
Yes, so I think this is also related to the previous problem. So in general, I think what gives meaning to life or whatever that we do is responsibility. If you are responsible for something, that gives meaning to what you do. So the same applies to research. I think when we decide on what problem we want to choose, we always need to be mindful of what are the applications of these results. Am I solving a particular, real problem out there, or am I helping maybe some particular industry or like particular applications which are not the most, important problems for humanity today? So I think as a researcher, although this is not covered as, part of the education usually, unfortunately, but researchers need to think about the ethical aspects of their research. They need to feel responsible for what they do. It's not a good enough reason that if half of the world work on a problem, then it's okay if I work, but if I don't work, it doesn't change anything. So from the viewpoint of a researcher, you need to feel responsible, choose problems. You like, especially PhD students, right? They are spending the best years of their life. And now you can choose, in 10 years, you want to be the one that contributed to some problem which like some particular company or industry would benefit, or something that would benefit the humanity.
Thank you, Prof. Reza. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I think I'd like to expand a bit on what Tulika and Reza have said. So I think one of the really challenging problems is coming up with the research problem. And if you look at any good university, what good researchers spend a significant amount of time on is coming up with the research problem. And after that, it's often, applying the methodology and so on. So I think usually what results in good research is having some degree of personal relevance and stake in the problem. So really understanding, say, if you've worked in a particular industry, or you're concerned about, say, healthcare related issues or education related issues, that then motivates you to really fundamentally understand some of these problems that are in these areas, whether it's health behavior change, whether it's how to make people contribute knowledge and so on. So if you start with that kind of a premise, then you're more definitely likely to have something at the end which is going to have a good impact. And then you have these three elements, that is the novelty, the rigor, and then the impact. So I think the research problem formulation, that doesn't mean you take forever. I've seen students get paralyzed reading literature, and they, oh, I found another one. And at some point they have to take the plunge and say, okay, this is what is known and this is where I'm going to, there are students, and I think some of us are guilty at some point of time where you just, oh, yet another study has come out, and you keep on doing your literature search. But at some point you take stock and you say, this is what is known, and I'm going to depart from it, and I'm going to find another way. There's these kind of issues with this problem, and I'm going to find a way to contribute. So I think, yeah, that's what makes sense.
Right. So thank you, Resident Prophet Trey, because you just launched us into another layer of this conversation, which is a selection of the research problem. One of the issues we struggle with as PhD students is we know that there's a difference between deep and substantive research problems, and they are shallow and ephemeral research problems. What advice can you give us as young researchers? How do we evaluate or discern, that this is a problem that I should focus on for the next, 5 years, 10 years of my life?
Yeah, so yeah, David, maybe you start.
Did I jump it? I go?
Yes, Prof. Min, we are with you.
Okay, go ahead then.
Okay, sorry. So I really believe that this is an ongoing triangulation process. Many students come in very, very passionate about some subject that they want to work on, and it turns out that, because they don't have the literature background, that particular subject area is much wider than it seems. It may look narrow to a beginning student, but it's actually the subject of maybe hundreds of PhD theses. Right, so you have to narrow it down. This comes with experience and time. So I think it's important to have a vision, to work towards that with the guidance of your advisor, but also to be a bit stubborn. I think being a PhD student, you have to have quite a lot of stubbornness in order to stay the course, because as Tulika and everyone else has mentioned, there are lots of research that's published, and it can try to sway you in some ways to change your research topic as things get faddish. But I think as long as you have that vision, that anchoring at the very beginning, that your advisor and you agree to try to shape, that can help you avoid this incremental research problem. And I'll let David expand.
Sure, great. I think that I want to also take the researcher's perspective to this question. Right? So I spoke earlier about our vision. Right, indeed, vision is very important. We anchor on that. But when we get started, that vision is probably not quite there yet. Right, so how do we get bootstrap out of that? So I would say that first, that when we don't have a vision yet, we can listen to other people's vision. That is a starting point. We go to conferences and to listen to the keynotes and hear about what other people's visions are, right? Before I develop my own personal vision, then others' vision can serve as stand-ins, right? until I gained the ability and experience to dissect, to analyze, to gradually develop my own personal vision of research. Right? So again, I want to take my like a personal perspective, like how I developed my own research vision, right? So I was like clueless when I entered grad school, right? So I think that I want to share that an anecdote with you that I remember that when I went up for the qualifying exam, and I gave my presentation, and that was 3 papers, and I gave my like a reasonable, hardworking, and not too dumb students. I gave my presentation and did reasonably well, and the committee passed me. And after that, when I came out, my advisor, and by the way, she's a great visionary of the field, and told me the following: he said, "Well, David, you did well, but your presentation should have a vision." Well, I flatly don't know what he's talking about. I was second year in grad school. I understand things that algorithm, I understand reasonably well theorems, proofs. I understand a little bit about experiments. Back then, I was not even that hands-on. And so when he tell me about vision, one, I don't understand it. Two, I think it's totally irrelevant. And all that matters is theorems, proofs, algorithms, and experiments. I mean, what is a vision? That is just totally it's too abstract for me, right? But over the years, as I went through the program, probably my Jean-Claude, my former advisor, told me a few times about that. And well, I'm not sure. I don't. It didn't register my mind that what exactly the effect on me, but I think I must have wondered, being a good student, I must have wondered every so often that what he was talking about. I'm not sure I came up with a solution during the time when I was a PhD student, right? But at some point, I think that probably a couple of years after I got my faculty position, and one day I was just sitting there, and suddenly just sort of dawned on me that saying that, oh, that's what he meant, right? The direction for the future, and I'm developing this algorithm, that theorem. What do they add up to, right? And what is the destination I want to reach in 5 years, or maybe even 10 years, right? Where is the field headed, and how do I connect my personal research with the direction of the field? Now, going back to what we were talking about in terms of the purpose of research, right? So I think I believe there is a somewhat false dichotomy between the value or impact that can be generated within the academia versus the broader impact that we can have on the society. I don't believe academia comes up with its own values. Our value, the research we create, or the so-called academic value, is a derivative. It's a derived value from the eventual impact on the society. Usually, our academic values or the novelty and the potential use of the research results is somewhat long-term, right? I mean, look, the companies deliver quarterly results. We never talk about quarterly result. We barely talk about yearly result, right? So within the context of academia, I don't think that there is, by and large, our long-term value should be well aligned with our potential benefits that we can bring to the society. Otherwise, I think that there is no reason for society to have this this institution called a university, right? So we are here because our potential long-term value we can deliver to the society. We should always keeping that in mind. In the short term, maybe sometimes not only that they don't kind of overlap, sometimes there's even conflict. But over the long term, I think it's well aligned. I think we should all keep in that mind. The so-called dichotomy sometimes is more of a symptom between the short term versus the long term, rather than a real dichotomy between what we should do for research and what we should do for the society.
Yeah, so maybe let me highlight actually one keyword that David mentioned. I think it's extremely important to work and actually discuss with people that have good vision. working with people, discussing with people that have great vision actually helps a lot for you to, navigate well and go through the trajectory that I mentioned before. There are certain characteristics that the researcher need to have. One of them, which is I think the most important one, is to be able to do critical thinking. Always when you read papers, you attend talks, you talk to your advisor, you write your own work, always you need to ask this question of, so what, right? Have a dialogue with what you read, have a dialogue with the person that like you're listening to, instead of just absorbing. If you have a dialogue, actually it helps you always to expand your vision.
I just want to inject one thing here. That I really like the Rita's question, the so what question. That's my favorite question. So what, right? So you come up with an algorithm. So what? You want to solve this research problem. So what? Right? I really like that question.
Yeah, so if I could just add to what Reza was saying, I think it's important that when you are embarking on your PhD, you don't have the crystal ball to see like what's going to happen 5 years down the line, but you are really looking at a PhD in which you will get 4 to 5 years down the line, and so when you are reading the papers, you are reading the whatever has already appeared. You are sort of getting a snapshot of the past in some sense, right? But what you are really trying to see is that where the field will move in the future, and it's very difficult to have that crystal ball. I mean, as a PhD student, even as a senior researcher, I think that's a difficult problem to figure out in some way. And so what Reza said is that it's very important for us to engage with the community to see where it is going. And I think at this point, actually, fortunately, I mean, even though we are all stuck here and all that stuff, but it's a great time for you to attend all the conferences, right? I mean, most of the conferences these days are zero cost probably, or $10, $20. So do ask your advisor to help you sign up for all these conferences. You can attend all the keynotes. You can participate in all the discussion that's going on, mostly through Slack channels and whatnot, right? So I think it's a great way for you to actually engage with the global community to figure out what's going on, to get their perspective, because when you talk to them, that's when you see the future. When you read the papers, you are somehow, in some sense, getting a sense of the past. So I think that's the value addition you get by going to conferences, because all that discussion that you take place in, now you can do it sitting here in Singapore. So I think this is a way for you to get a sense of where the field is going, and that kind of determines what topic you want to pick up.
Yeah, I want to build a little bit
Min,
on.
okay, go ahead. Yeah, Min, go ahead.
Actually, you haven't spoken. Please go ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to make 2 points following up on what people have been discussing. So I think one thing is that there are multiple ways we can contribute. So on one side, we're writing papers, which is mainly for the academic audience, and they're going through the whole rigor of the review process and so on. We can also talk to industry. It doesn't mean that we have to necessarily develop a prototype system or have our system in translation, but there's multiple ways. For example, I've worked with companies on research grants. You do consultancy work, and you very often write different kinds of reports, and you participate, say, in writing news articles, blogs, and so on. So I think as researchers, we can customize our results and our findings to both the audiences. So in that sense, the dichotomy, etc., can be alleviated. So it's a bit of a false dichotomy. I mean, you can take your work and you can draw different kinds of insights for the academic community and for the industry in terms of those kind of results. So I think that is a bit of a dichotomy. About this vision, I'm not sure about other fields, but I know about IS, there's not I think, one single direction in which the whole field is heading. Yes, there are some kind of trends you can see, and that also depends on technology, definitely, since we're studying use of technology and its impact. But I can just give you a small example from the kind of work I've been doing. So when I started, the IS field was very much, and a lot of the work was centered in North America, right? That's where all the leading work was going on. But everyone was looking at businesses. They were only looking at private sector. So being in Singapore, I saw how efficiently, I mean, people can argue with me. I'm not talking in a political sense, but I saw how government was using technology, and I saw how Singapore was a leader in e-government. And to me, it was very opportunistic and relevant to start looking at public sector use of information technology. And believe it or not, 10 years down the road, other people in IS started saying, okay, e-government is an important area. This is where many societal impacts happen. And there was a very strong North American bias that over there, private sector is more efficient than public sector. So they do not look at how IT use happens in the public sector. But being in Singapore, I think I had a different perspective. And I think researchers, PhD students in NUS can actually tap on some of these opportunities that Asia, China, Singapore, etc. offer. We don't have to do everything exactly like what North America does. I think part of being a good researcher is seizing the opportunities that you have, seizing the unique problems that you have. So maybe my perspective is a bit different based on what I've experienced. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Prof. Min, you had something to add?
Yeah, I think, Archer, you pretty much said it all. That I wanted to also add is that everyone has a unique perspective and a unique advantage. And I think realizing that and adding to what Tulika said about looking at where you think you're most passionate or have an advantage gives you a clear advantage and leverage over others. I hear this very commonly, especially for artificial intelligence and machine learning, where there's lots of data. Many students think, well, I'm in academia, I don't have access to tons of data and tons of compute. So how can I compete? And the answer is really easy. You don't compete with them on the same level playing field. You play with things that where you have an advantage on, right? So you have to cultivate that, look at what you're interested in, look at the parts in your background that give you a different perspective, and you'll be able to run in a direction that's very different and impactful in its own way, different than others. I'm just reminded also that, when we study publications, we often look at their citation rates. And that's only just because we can count citations. That's the only reason why we do that. So especially among junior students, I think this is always a source of anxiety. How many publications, how many citations do you have? And comparing it to another more successful lab mate, that can be a source of anxiousness. But, because we are only looking where the lights are on, right? We can measure citations and things like that. But I think once you have your own vision and your own idea of what impact means, those types of predilections go away, right? We worry more about whether we're doing the right thing with our time here in the academic institution.
Right.
Can I say something about the citation? Because I think this is something that,
yes, please.
1 minute, is that, again, the outcome, the main outcome of research is not really a paper, is not the citations you get. The main outcome of research is a researcher that can solve problems. So there are great researchers whose papers were not discovered, or at the time they people didn't cite, and then 15 years after, 10 years after, then they're having big impact in the whole world, right? So, but I'm 100% sure that the researcher at the moment that he was working on that had, you know, a lot of impact on other researchers around her, right? Because people, you know, smart people can detect who is good. So I think students should not be worried about papers getting accepted or not. You know, at some point it gets accepted, or like citations. If you do good work, smart people would discover the good work, right? So don't worry about that.
Yes. So thank you, Professor. That's a unique perspective. I say this because we know that our status and compensation as scholars often depends on how frequently and where we publish. So to what extent do you think maybe these assessments that we have can cause us to tackle problems that are not interesting or that are not important because we have to?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's happening is that we have really an explosion in terms of the number of publications that's coming out in computing and in computer science in particular. I was just last week talking to the executive director of Archive because we are trying to have some kind of collaboration between Archive and ACM. And you know, she was showing the numbers, and it's just mind-boggling. There are 160 papers that get submitted to Archive every single day, and I'm sure Min knows this. You know, this is just a huge number of publications, and if I count like how many papers are getting published in ACM, IEEE, and add them up together, it's probably about, I don't know, 200, 250 papers just coming out from computer science, right? So a lot of it is actually quite useless, right? So I think in some sense, there is a consensus, and that you cannot just look at, you know, where the papers have been published, and you cannot just look at the citations, because believe it or not, I mean, when a conference has 15% acceptance rate, there are some papers that gets clearly accepted, but then there is the middle band, which is, you know, tossing the coin. So I think both Computing Research Association, CRA, and ACM both believe that the way to evaluate people is not to really just look at their number of publications, look at their citations, but look at what they have done, right? So you choose your 5 or 3 most significant works, and you tell me that, you know, what it means, right? Why is it important? And I think there is that understanding, as far as I can tell. So of course there is the first, so let's suppose that you have finished your PhD and you are going up in the market, job market, right? So of course there is this concept that people are going to look at for the first level of filtering, right? The publications cannot help, but I mean, you know, there is just too many people working in this. But beyond that, I think what becomes important is what exactly have you done, and you know, what difference did that make? So.
Okay,
Right.
let me follow up on this a little bit, very briefly, right? So I think the essence of the issue here is about quantity versus that of quality, right? So there needs to be a balance between these two, and over time, I think the challenge today is the quantity is increasing far much faster than quality, right? So that's a challenge today. Now, for students, I understand the pressure, right? So for the senior faculty members, when maybe it's easy for us to speak about always like touted the value of quality in the absence of productivity and quantity, and that's easy for us. But for the students, I think that I would say that yes, it is true that a minimum level of quantity is required. Okay. Now, exactly what that number is, I think that it varies from field to field, varies from group to group, varies from one advisor to the other. I would suggest you talk to your advisor. To me, when I talk to my students, my threshold is non-zero. Okay? 0 is bad, but anything above is fine. Beyond non-zero, it's a quality that matters. I think that is Now, I think it's always keep in mind that how do we now if you're a new student, it's also important to keep in mind and how do we measure quality. Um, there is no universal formula for that, but I can suggest the following. I was called that the sanity tests. All right, imagine that you are finishing your PhD. Someone come to you and ask, what have you done for your PhD? Okay, and you are supposed to describe your work in no more than 3 sentences. Okay, if you can do that, good. I think that by and large that you have passed that sanity test. If you can describe your work in just 1 sentence and covers the impact of your work, fabulous. You probably done way better than the average. Right? So this is the sanity test that I would suggest.
Thank you, Prof. Shu. So I think we have covered a lot. Unfortunately, time is not our friend. A lot of good points have been raised. What I wanted to delve into, we talked about being visionaries, and there's something that I want us to ruminate on, because we've talked about we have to be stubborn, we have to be visionaries, and there's a key word that we have in research that good research should be interesting. And I think that ties in with being visionaries, and the definition of interesting research is that it challenges the norm in the field. What advice can you give to young researchers? Because we also talked about engaging with community, attending conferences, listening to other people's visions. How do we listen to what is out there, read what is out there, but don't conform to what is out there?
So I think, as a scientist, you have the facts, right? You are always, even if you are writing a paper that's probably challenging somebody else's, I don't know, solution results, depending on the field, you are challenging him or her with facts, right? And as long as you do that, I think there is no issue. In fact, I know a colleague of mine who completely destroyed one particular line of research by showing that the assumption that was made at the very beginning on a string of papers by different people, that assumption was wrong, right? Now, do you think, but he never had any problem. So as far as I can see, as a researcher, if you are honest, if you are intellectually honest, and you are actually, doing something that you can completely support with facts, I think, that's not an issue.
Yeah, let me add on that a bit. I think we shouldn't really be thinking of it as a political process. We're in a process of knowledge building. And if we have good evidence and we have reasons to challenge existing ideas, I think we should be bold about that. And in terms of novelty, etc., I think very often a lot of the good ideas really come from boundary spanning. So when you've got ideas, insights, say from one area or working in one set of problems, and then you apply it to another set and you adapt it and you bring new ideas in, I think a lot of the kind of breakthroughs happen through such cross-fertilization. So that's about the novelty. About challenging existing norms, for example, in IS, again, most of the work was being done on corporate systems, okay? ERP, you name it. Cloud, etc. Now you see more and more consumer use of IS. So you have mobile apps for gaming, you have it for fitness and so on. Now, if you take the theories that were developed earlier for the corporate systems, a lot of the boundaries then break. But if you kind of say that this work was fitting within this set of boundaries and these were the assumptions, then you kind of are building on that work, and you're saying now those break down, the context breaks down, the boundary conditions break down, and now you see things like hedonic use of IS, which is not related to corporate use of IS, right? For example, say social media or gaming and so on. So I think it's not really about challenging somebody's ideas. It's more like explicating what are the conditions under, say, that set of results applied, and now you're saying that the conditions have changed or there's something fundamentally different. So I think it's really about knowledge building, knowledge extending, building on what is there and then articulating what is different, rather than saying, oh, I proved XX person wrong, you know, in some sense.
Right. So it's building on current research and maybe looking at old problems from a new perspective. So
In
I
new
want,
contexts of use, when I talk about online communities, we've seen so many variations, from knowledge sharing to e-commerce communities, review communities, healthcare communities, innovation communities. We see some, you know, if you take theory and you abstract it to a very general level, everything looks the same, right? You can say there's costs and benefits and you're done. But when you say go to a mid level of theorizing, that's when you see the differences, say, in the context, in the assumptions, in the boundary conditions. And then you can say, okay, this is what was studied before, and why doesn't that work anymore? And now I'm coming up with a new set of theories to apply to these evolving new contexts of, say, information system use, just to give an example from the kind of work that I do.
yes. Thank you, Prof. Trey. So still on the issue of selecting good research problems and the dimension of novelty, one of the questions we got from the computer science side of things is, of course, we know that, you know, interesting research problems tackle novel problems. However, students struggle in discerning the feasibility and viability of such research problems in the beginning. What are some practical nuggets you can give students in that regard?
So, yeah, I always ask my students to start with something that they can tackle, right? Because I think in general, it is very, very, so you are looking at, you know, something that you need to create 5 year in a 5-year timeline, and you are hoping it should be something coherent, right? Your thesis should be coherent. It should not just be a collection of papers. So you have that you know, vision in mind, and then you are going forward. But I think it's important for you to have something very concrete at the beginning, like within 2 years, 2.5 years, maybe that boosts your confidence, right? That tells you that yes, I can do research. I think as a PhD student, that's what I struggled with most, because you know, during my master's, I easily got like 2 papers, right, in top conference. So I thought, okay, that's easy. And the reason that it happened was because you know, I had a problem, a concrete problem to work with. So that's easy, right? Once I go to PhD, I'm actually looking for what problem should I look at. So that makes a lot of difference. And I think it's very important for you to get that confidence that yes, I can do it. And so start with something maybe simple and concrete, but get it done, you know, get that confidence, and then you can start you know, having you know, sort of focusing on bigger and more challenging, I guess problems. But that's coming from a systems side of a system side perspective, because in systems we take a long time just to learn how to deal with the infrastructure, right? How to build the system in the first place before you can even write your first paper. So that's far harder, and so you know, so that's coming from the systems perspective for me.
Yeah, I think I also totally agree with this. It's an important, interesting problem, is the one which is the most important, the most interesting problem within the reach of your capabilities now. Otherwise, you would not be able to finish that, and then it's not going to happen. So the impact would be zero. So I think that's very important. But one other point that I want to add to this is that, again, a paper is not the objective. Even if you choose a problem, the paper is the byproduct. Is as a researcher, and some people think that they have to first do the research and then they write the paper. Like, the writing happens as you're thinking. It helps you think better, right? So it's something that, like, imagine that somebody is working on something and constantly is producing some content, right? That at some point would become a paper, right? So that's a byproduct. What is important is, like, what problem you want to solve, and then maybe for a particular problem you will publish, I don't know, 6 papers. For one problem you might publish like 1 paper. What is important is the problem and, like, having that right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you to the panelists for the lively discussion. Let's now welcome or invite the audience into the discussion. Please send your questions to the group chat. We have one question here from JN. He's asking, do you think deep learning will be the good research topic in the next 5 to 10 years? So I think for this, probably Prof. David Xu and Prof. Reza.
Okay, I'll try. All right, so I will not answer this question directly because I can't, right? I don't have that crystal ball. But I will draw this analogy and ask the following question, but I think that serves an answer. Do you remember what was the most popular research topic 10 years ago? If you don't, I think that question was answered.
I would use deep learning to answer this question. Basically, like, the question is not the right question to ask. You know, it's a, like, you are doing gradient descent in your, you know, research path, right? Now the question is your direction right now is the right direction, right? And then after 5 years, if you are always on the right path, then you find the most important problem, which is the most important problem 5 years from now. It might be something in deep learning, it might be something else.
Yeah, to also take the machine learning part into perspective, you know, Reza raised gradient descent. If your gradient never changes direction over 5 years, then I'd argue you're doing something wrong, right? Because you could have just jumped right directly to the end by taking a bigger step. So I think that Reza's suggestion or point rather is that the PhD training is the end result is a researcher. It's not a set of papers. So the learning journey is definitely part of it, right? We want to take experiences that you have as a unique individual, that you attend certain conferences, and, you know, as part of this university and this school, you're you know, co-creating knowledge with your peers, right? So that journey is uniquely identifying you as an individual, and you bring your own individual talents to shape your problem. So you know, any problem is worth it if you think it's the right direction to go in. I'd say there is a good balance between vision and concrete outcomes. I think it's very, very hard for junior scholars not to be swayed to produce papers. I can remember that amount of pressure when I was in those ages, even though that was a while back. So I think it's the team's responsibility, meaning your advisor, your senior peers in your group, if you have a group, as well as your own self, to help find that right balance, right? At the beginning, it may tend to making sure that you have a good amount of confidence. I think confidence building is very important. But later on, it can be more towards the visionary side. I always ask my students to start with the vision first, but then realize that that vision is always incomplete. It's always wrong. But a wrong model is still helpful if it's useful. So it's important to revisit those assumptions, revisit those constraints, and then ask, okay, in light of my current expertise level, what do I need to change about my understanding of this problem? Which way do I need to shape it to make it the most impactful?
Right.
Can I have just a quick word out here just to add a little bit of spice to all this discussion? So I was talking about I was asking what was the most popular computer science research topic 10 years ago, right? I found it, right? I used to teach this course called the Art of Computer Science Research. Every time I teach it, I invent a research project title that is for the fun of it. And so I actually have a record over here. All right, so let me read it to you. What was the most popular topic over the years? In year 2007, the topic that was popular, and I invented this title for the project, which didn't exist, was SVM-based method for classifying gene microarray video data. Right, so you probably don't even remember, unless you work on computer machine learning, you don't even remember what SVM is today, right? So why is the gene microarray data? Because back then, computational biology was fashionable, right? Year 2010, multimedia analysis of the impact of biomedical imaging data on green environments. So that's 3 years later that is environmental research becomes popular. Year 2013, a big data framework for video analysis on the cloud. Now, big data arrived. Year 2016, deep learning in a trusted software environment for aging populations. All right, so this will last for a little while, and we will see what happens in 10 years' time.
Right. Thank you. So what I'm hearing the panelists say is that we should focus on developing ourselves and our skill sets as researchers so that in case our research problem becomes obsolete, we can still be, we can survive the world of research and academia. So I have a question then for you, Prof. Trey, because in the field of IS, we have different tracks, if you will. So what is your advice to IS PhD students? Should we focus on mastering the different methods? Because some people pride themselves as researchers in a particular method. And then some of us say, oh, I'm a researcher in this domain. So I see that there's a discrepancy in terms of just personal branding as a researcher. What do you have to share on that?
I think that's an important question. And I think knowing one's methods as a researcher, knowing how to do, say, rigorous survey research or experiments or applying econometrics techniques, I think that's very important. That's our tool set, right? I mean, if we don't have that grounding, which is why we have so many methods courses. So that is, I mean, to me, that's a kind of prerequisite. But frankly speaking, most of us, most researchers, there's not that much research in terms of methodological advancement. I mean, a lot of it is then using this tool set to address various problems, right? There are people who are working on improving the set of methods, for example, whether it's the statistical methods or the econometrics method and so on. So when somebody asked the question about deep learning 10 years down the road, it almost sounded like they just wanted to improve the techniques itself, because to me, deep learning by itself is not a topic in that sense, unless you're trying to just focus on the methods. But in terms of areas, especially when we're talking about relevance, there is some responsibility to do things which are relevant to society, right? And that changes over time. Yes, but if we are doing some if we're trying to understand some fundamental questions, I think that can adapt as we go along. For example, in my case, I look at participation in online communities. And as the nature of online communities change, then I adapt my research, right? So in that sense, you can still be sort of an expert in a particular area and known in an area, but you still maintain your relevance, because relevance is also important as you go along. So thinking more fundamentally what your expertise is. I think that's very important for a researcher, and it doesn't happen immediately when doing the PhD research. It takes a bit of time to evolve. But I think that's where people's own preferences, strengths, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses really comes in. For example, I had a colleague who was trained in, she was both a lawyer and an IS researcher. So she could then bring in that kind of expertise in, right? So I think, yeah, it's not only, you have your set of skill sets, but you also want to have your fundamental interests and expertise that you can then adapt as the phenomenon changes. But you really don't want to be always, say, following a particular fad in some sense, that this is what it is. So if I'm looking at online communities and collaboration, yes, I can then take that and then I can apply it, say, in human AI collaboration, for example, which is where a lot of collaboration is heading, right? So I can take my fundamental set of, expertise, and then I can adapt it as I go along. So it does take time for researchers to understand what their fundamental set of expertise is. And that's something maybe as a PhD student, you want to gradually develop the understanding of what you're good at, what your interests are, what that core, what you want to be known for, say. Yeah.
Right. So we have questions here from the audience. We have one from Mahi and George. I think these questions are related. Mahi is asking, is it mandatory for a good research to beat the state of the art? And George is asking, do you have any tips for new PhD students about developing research taste in terms of having a feel for what the interesting or important problems are? Thank you, Prof. Min. I see that he's responding, and Prof. Reza to the chat. Any one of the other panelists, if you have answers to these audience questions.
Maybe I can try. I think developing a taste is extremely important, but it's also very challenging. It's a taste essentially is the outcome, is a choice, right? So the choice, developing the ability to make choices is about maturity. It's a combination of many things, right? So I would say that in order to develop that taste or develop the ability to make good choices, one would read widely, go attend to conferences and listen to keynotes, talk to other researchers, particularly the good ones, right? And also that we will also, when we listen and talk to others, we'll critically analyze what other people are saying. And over time, and also it's very important, I think I want to go back to what I kind of said about the vision. And so I think the one thing that's dangerous about trying to achieving one wrong way to achieving a vision is to sit idly and thinking about the grand vision day and night. That's not going to happen that way. Right? Our vision develops and matures as we work on concrete tasks. That's one very effective way of doing that. So one last maybe useful tip I can offer is that in the beginning, I mean, that taste depends a lot on the experiences. In the beginning, a student doesn't have enough experience, so that's why you have an advisor. Your advisor is your friend, right? So in the beginning, you don't have experience, but your advisor does, right? So talk to your advisor often and seek his views, opinions, but don't believe it completely, right? So whatever, we are researchers, we are scientists, whatever other people say, it's more important to hear what is said rather who says it. And also that analyze what is said, is it backed up by evidence? And everything needs to be dissected and analyzed, eventually digested by yourself, and then it becomes internalized, it becomes your own. And over and over, if we do this over and over again, and over time, and we will develop that taste, our own, the unique taste of our own.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Shu. We have a question from Yahui. I think this is an excellent question. He's asking, I think there's no doubt that it's helpful to discuss with people. So what he's asking is, things are different now given that conferences are online. Prof. Mitra talked earlier about engaging with community. How can we do that effectively in this new normal?
Um, yeah, I mean, there is no doubt that in-person conferences gives you a lot of benefit in terms of the discussions because it's a free flow. Having said that, I think we are slowly seeing that there are certain benefits of these online conferences as well. First is that you can actually listen to the talk. If this is a video talk, you can actually pause. You can try to think, right? You can go back and read the paper. You can follow it up. So I think if you are interested in one particular work, it's becomes much easier for you to understand that when you do that. And I think at least in my area, almost all conferences offer a Slack channel where you actually engage with the authors. And I think that does not happen that often in in-person conferences because you just get to catch the author for maybe 10-15 minutes, but here the author will actually engage with you in a much deeper discussion. So I think in terms of technical depth, that discussion is happening quite significantly, at least what I see in my own community. But what is missing is really these sudden discussions that brings up new ideas, right? Where you just kind of get around a coffee table and talk. I think there are conferences that are trying to bring in that kind of feature, like virtual tables and whatnot. I'm sure we will innovate and we'll figure out how to do that. But yeah, I mean. I'm sure, I mean, we cannot just always think that what was happening pre-COVID, we have to live our life maybe forever in this way, who knows? So I'm sure we will be able to innovate and figure out a way to actually engage in this discussion going forward. But I would just also want to add that with the fact that I could not even talk to my own PhD students in person, that actually makes everybody more amenable to talking and collaborating remotely. So if you want to engage with another research group, maybe in US, Europe, I don't know. I think that has become much easier now because everybody is talking in Zoom, right? Irrespective of whether you are talking to your own students or you are talking to somebody else. So I think that barrier has kind of gone away to some extent, and I think that's a good thing that you can probably take advantage of.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Mitra. Our time is fast spent. Thank you so much for all your to ask the panelists for any last minute thoughts. But I want to also, in your last minute thoughts, if you could address a question that I think is a good one. I think some of us have faced this situation where the question is, how do you handle a situation where a new paper is published that is almost similar to your research? So any last minute thoughts and just a quick answer to that question would be great.
Okay, maybe let me take a stab at that. So one question was, how do you get into an area and when there's lots of papers? I think a good way to really start is look for recent review papers. Then that's one place where you can get a summary of what's been happening in a particular area. So I think that helps. And then you can look at what's happened after, say, that review paper. So that's a good introduction. And there's various review papers in different areas, and they set out directions for future research. For the other thing where, they're almost covering the very similar thing, I think at that point, you really need to figure out how you want to distinguish yourself. You need to really look very deeply into that work and say, how can I actually, in terms of my problem, in terms of the technique I'm using, in terms of the data I'm using, how in fact can I compare at a much more granular level, say, and then differentiate from the work. Yeah, it's not a fun thing for sure to see that happen, but yeah, there are ways that you can still salvage that and move on. Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Oteng. So I guess I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to all the other participants as well. Thank you.
Last minute remarks from the rest of the panelists, if any.
Yeah, I think I just have one comment. The fact is that, researcher's career is very, very long, maybe 45 years, I don't know. So have fun. I think that's the most important thing, right? I mean, all these things about papers and publications and all these things are there. But I think unless you are having fun with what you are doing, you will never get something that's interesting. So I think that's my only thing that I wanted to share, that it's very important to have fun in the whole process. So that's all. Thank you. Thanks to everybody.
My finishing remark will be, I think I enjoyed the session greatly, and enjoyed all the discussion with all the other panelists as well. And these questions that you have posed over here are very interesting and very exciting, very challenging for the students. At the same time, it's nothing new here. And every question that's been raised over here has been experienced by everyone who has gone through the PhD program. And don't feel that you're alone and that you are facing a difficulty that's never been experienced before. Other people can go through it, you can too. So I would like to wish all of you, the new PhD student here, enjoy your journey.
Yes, so also I want to say that, in particular, don't panic for that question. So again, I want to reiterate what I said, that the whole thing is a process for developing you as a human being, is a way of approaching problems. So like, don't materialize this. Papers get published, projected, accepted, whatever. Focus on yourself. Enjoy again the process. This is a unique opportunity that, especially in the environment that you have a lot of freedom on thinking and solving problems that are of great importance to you. I think this is not happening anywhere else. And also I would like to again shout out to all the program committee members for running such a great event. This is the event that also, again, like, you can get involved, discuss with other peers. And thanks a lot, Oteng. I think you did a fantastic job running this panel. You can run panels, but yeah, this was great. And thanks to the all other panelists.
Prof. Min?
Yeah, nothing else to say. I think everyone has asked very good questions, and I think hopefully this topic has been helpful for many of you. It does take a little bit of stubbornness and a lot of courage to do a PhD. So I wish you all the best in going forward.
All right. Thank you so much to the panelists. We have learned a lot from you. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. Have a good evening.
Let's thank our organizing committee and all the moderators.
Thank you. Bye.